Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games. It's that time of the year again, folks. It's time for my top 100 board games of all time. And this year I thought, as a precursor to the top 100 proper, I would include my top 110 to 101 games of all time. So before we get into that particular list, I do want to update you guys as far as what took place, what transpired over the course of 2021. So first of all, I learned nearly 100 new games in the year 2021. So there's going to be a lot of new games in the shuffle now for this particular top 100. As a matter of fact, in just the top 100 alone, there are 35 new games. That's a little bit over 1/3 of the list. And obviously that means lots of games were bumped down on the list or just got knocked out of the top 100 altogether. So without any further ado, let's get straight into today's list. Number 110 board game of all time for me is Dungeon Quests. And this is a game that's new for me in 2021, but this is not a new game at all. As a matter of fact, its original iteration came out sometime in the late 1980s. This edition right here was published in the mid-2000s by Fantasy Flight. This is the third edition of this game. And Dungeon Quest is a very simplistic dungeon crawl type of game. Players are basically taking on the role of these different characters, and they're traversing the different corridors and rooms in a dungeon, trying to search for treasure, ultimately trying to make it to the center of the board, which is the dragon's lair, in order to get the more valuable treasure. All the while, they are facing different encounters, different monsters, different threats that endanger them and put their lives at risk. And if they are ever, their health is ever knocked down to zero, they are totally eliminated, unless you play with the official variant that I play with, which is basically they're just knocked down to half their health, and then they have to discard a few of their treasure item cards. This is a press your luck, push your luck type of game. Not lots of strategy per se, but it's so much fun to just go through these tunnels and encounter all the things that it has available for you. Also, I like the tile laying that takes place. The dungeon or the board starts out empty, but you pick tiles as you go through and you place them next to the tile that you're moving from. So as the game unfolds, so does the dungeon, and I really like that style. My number 110 game of all time, Dungeon Quest. Now we move on to my number 109 board game of all time, and that is Taj Mahal, designed by Reiner Knizia, the game of power and influence in India. And this game is not new to me at all. I've been playing this game for several years. Last year, it was actually ranked in my top 50. It actually was ranked at number 46. And this year, it's been bumped out of the top 100 as low as number 109. One of the reasons why is I do not play this game as much anymore. As a matter of fact, I didn't play it at all in 2021. And I think I might have only played it like once in the entire year of 2020. It doesn't have an official solo mode. And honestly speaking, it doesn't even shine at 2 players. You kind of need 3 or 4 players for this game to really shine. But I do enjoy it. It's kind of like a quasi auction bidding game where you're trying to gain control of territories in these different regions in India. And a little bit of that is going to contribute to a little bit of a route network building, where if you connect palaces that go through different regions, you can add additional points. It's really cool. I like the resource management in this game. This game kind of innovated what Castles of Burgundy borrowed years later, where when you gain a resource, not only do you score for it, but you score for all of the previously acquired resources of the same type. So it's kind of like a cumulative thing where you keep on scoring for those things. Really cool, really neat. I like the simple auction bidding that takes place at the beginning of each round. But yeah, I haven't played it lately. Let's see if we play it this year and maybe it bumps it up a little bit on the list. Probably not, with all the new games I plan on learning this year as well. My number 109 board game of all time, Taj Mahal. Now we move on to my number 108, and that is Wisdom of Solomon. And this is a Bible-themed worker placement resource management game that is also not new to my list. I had this game ranked at 65 last year, and it has bumped down. This game, I do find a way to play it solo. I've become much more of a solo gamer in the last year or so. And I do like the solo variant that this game comes with. They have an automa player, which is referred to as Jeroboam, and I do have to make some modifications in order to make Jeroboam a little bit more competent and a little bit more of a threat, and that probably hurts the game a bit, but I really like this game. It has a nice, cool city building aspect as you're building these different buildings that you put in your player area, and they either grant you permanent benefits or permanent bonuses to your actions, or they grant you particular worker placement spots that are unique to you as a player. Really cool, lots of neat things going on in this game. My number 108 game of all time, Wisdom of Solomon. Now we move on to my 107, and that is Tiny Epic Western by Scott Almes. And those who've been watching this channel for some time know that I'm a big fan of the Tiny Epic series. As a matter of fact, you can check out my top 5 Tiny Epic games of all times video so you can see where some of the other games rank on that list. Now, Tiny Epic Western was once actually my favorite, but it's one of those things where I'm not so much of a big fan of its solo variant. Its solo variant works just fine, but this game shines at 3 players, maybe 4 players, and I've only played it a few times at that higher player count. I normally play this at a solo game, and I think that hurts it a lot. I am a big fan of the Wild West theme, and again, I'm just a fan of how Scott Almes takes these big ideas and shrinks them down to size in order to fit these small boxes here. Really cool game, Wild West, Tiny Epic, my number 107 board game of all time, Tiny Epic Westerns. And now we move on to my number 106, and that is Shipwrights of the North Sea. And I forgot to mention that with Tiny Epic Western, it was also previously ranked on last year's list as high as number 49. So another game that was in the top 50 that was knocked out of the top 100 altogether. Shipwrights of the North Sea, however, was also on my list last year, and it was ranked number 69. So it fell down not quite as much as Tiny Epic Western, but still a notable drop. And Shipwrights of the North Sea is not only the first game in the North Sea trilogy, but it's the first published game by now renowned designer Shem Phillips. And Shipwrights of the North Sea is kind of like an unsung hero for this franchise, the North Sea series. Nobody talks about it because people seem to prefer the worker placement games of Shem Phillips, and I'm not to say that that's not me as well, but this game still has some really cool mechanisms taking place. Now, it does have a lot of Take That, so if you're not a big fan of Take That in your Euro games, perhaps you might not like that, but you can absolutely eliminate that Take That altogether by simply getting rid of the cards that are Take That cards. However, that does strip the game of lots of its charm, lots of its theme, and lots of its fun and enjoyability, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend to do so. But this game is cool. Resource management, you're gathering all the resources necessary to build your different ships, and it's kind of like a race. You're trying to race to complete 4 ships, which triggers the end of the game, and whoever has the most victory points, the most valuable ships combined, will be the winner of the game. Really cool, really neat, and again, the first pioneer in the North Sea trilogy and into what would be a very successful career for designer Shem Phillips. My number 106 board game of all time, Shipwrights of the North Sea. My number 105 board game of all time is Sheriff of Nottingham, and this is another game that was previously on my list, ranked pretty high at one point. A couple years ago, I think this was ranked in my top 40 perhaps. Last year, it was ranked at number 86, so it was already working its way down. And this year, it's ranked now at number 105. And this is a cool bluffing game where players take turns taking on the role of the sheriff, the evil Sheriff of Nottingham. And all the other players are the merchants who are trying to sneak in their goods. Sometimes they're legal goods, sometimes they're illegal goods, in order to score as many points as possible by gaining large sets of said goods. If the sheriff thinks that they're being lied to, they can check the secret bags of each player around, and if they catch them in the lie, then the player who lied to the sheriff has to pay a penalty. However, if the sheriff checks the bag and the player was telling the truth, then the sheriff needs to pay them a penalty. This is a very fun game, great game in its style, perhaps the best bluffing game out there. However, it has lowered on my list, namely due to the fact that I do not play this game as much. So that's going to be kind of like a recurring thing. There is something about out of sight, out of mind. Some games hold stronger, even if you haven't played them for a long time. Other games kind of need to be frequently in the forefront of your mind in order to retain their spots. And I guess for me, Sheriff of Nottingham is one of them. But definitely an awesome game that I would absolutely recommend to anybody. Number 105 board game of all time, Sheriff of Nottingham. Now we move on to my number 104, and that is a Game of Thrones, the board game. This is the second edition here, and this game is new to my list this year. I played it for the first time in 2021. Only played this game 2 times. However, I probably played this game more hours than any other game on this year's list. I played this game, the first game was like 6-7 hours, and the second game was over 4 hours. So tons of hours, over 10 hours of play for this game. This is a really cool game that kind of puts you into that Westeros feel. Lots of intrigue, lots of potential for alliance and attacking one another. Each player takes on the role of one of the houses of Westeros, and basically it's a little bit of a risk-like, diplomacy-like game, but with, I feel like, more sophisticated mechanisms. This game here has a little bit of card play to resolve combat, and basically players are simultaneously choosing the actions they're going to take in each of the regions that they occupy in Westeros, and then they're going to reveal those actions, and in turn order they're going to carry them out. So that's very, very important. There are 3 different tracks that you're trying to vie for leadership in. You got the Iron Throne, you got the fiefdom track, and you got the Royal Court track, and each of them grant you particular benefits, but ultimately you want to be the first player to build 7 castles or strongholds throughout the regions of Westeros, and if you are the first player to do so, then you are the winner of the game. Really cool, really fun. If you like the Game of Thrones theme and do not mind a much longer game, this is a game you might want to consider. Obviously, the length hurts it for me. For me, that's too long of a game. I'm definitely not going to play this game more than once or twice a year because it's too much of a time investment. And the fact that it plays so long does hurt it from having a better chance at cracking my top 100. For now, it's just number 104, A Game of Thrones, the board game. Now we move on to my 103, and my 103 is Patchwork, designed by Uwe Rosenberg. And this game last year was ranked number 39. I had this game ranked very highly. But again, it's a game that I, for whatever reason, did not get to play in the year 2021. And I have to penalize it for that and lower it to 103. But this is a great game, polyomino shaped Tetris-like game where players are trying to fill their grid, which represents their quilt, with all of these different multi-shaped pieces, and they're trying to occupy as many spots as possible because those empty spots will be deducted from your points at the end of the game. But also, each of these tiles have these buttons on them, which you can, well, that tile doesn't have buttons, but most of them have buttons on them, and the buttons will generate income for you throughout the game, which you're going to use that income to purchase more tiles, and also the remainder of those buttons that are still in your pool at the end of the game will be added to your score, contributing towards your victory. This is a 2-player only game, really cool, really fun. For now, my number 103 game of all time, Patchwork. And now we move on to my number 102, and this game is also new to my list this year, and that is Pandemic Rapid Response. And this here is, first of all, this is the first Pandemic product that I'm aware of that's not a Matt Leacock design or co-design. As a matter of fact, this is for Kane Klenko, who is known for Fuse, and what's the other game? Can't think of it from the top of my head, but these are real-time games that players are trying to beat the clock to meet the objective. These are cooperative games, and Pandemic Rapid Response is just that. This is a real-time clone of Pandemic. It simulates lots of the aspects of Pandemic, but gives you that real-time element. Now, players are basically flying through the globe, and the board represents their airplane, and they're going through all these different sections, trying to take their different particular actions in order to meet the needs for each of the particular regions around the world that happen to be infected. It's really, really cool. You're racing against the clock. The clock is represented by this sand timer that every time it flips, you remove a purple token. And once a certain amount of purple tokens have been removed, time is done, and if you have not cleared or cured or met the needs of all the particular cities that you need to, depending on your difficulty, then you have lost the game. I really like this game. It's really fun. A different spin or twist on Pandemic. However, I do not like it better than the original. It is a real-time game, which I think is very refreshing, but I'm not necessarily a huge fan of real-time, and therefore it does not crack my top 100. But again, a game that I would absolutely recommend. My number 102 board game of all time, Pandemic Rapid Response. And now, folks, we move on to the last game for today's video, my number 101, the game that just barely missed making it onto the top 100. And that game here is Thunder Alley by GMT Games and Jeff and Carla Horger. I believe that's their name. And this game is a race-themed game where players are controlling a team of cars. And depending on the player count, you have 3, 4, or 5 cars for your particular color or for your particular player. And basically, you're advancing through the racetrack through card play. And the card play is really cool and really neat because not only do the cards tell you how much spaces your cars can advance, or a car of your choice can advance, but the cards also tell you how much wear you're going to take and what particular type of wear you're going to take. And I believe there's 6 different types of wear in this game, depending on the particular part of the car's body, let's say. And these are all color coordinated or have a particular color assigned. And you will grab a token for each of those different colored wares that you take. And once you have a certain amount of tokens, your vehicle is slowed down. Not only that, you got to go to pit stops. You got to take a pit stop, basically take a break from the race in order to remove those wear tokens. However, half of the types of wear tokens, 3 of the 6 types, are unfixable. These are permanent wear. Your vehicle will not be able to have a pit stop and remove those tokens. So those are the ones you really want to watch out for. And those are the cards that you really want to be careful about when you play them and how often you play them. Because if you get too much permanent wear, then basically you're guaranteed that that vehicle is going to be slowed down for the rest of the game. Really interesting, really intricate, really nuanced racing. I really like the idea that not only winning is great, if your car wins the race, that's awesome. But because you have a team of 3 to 5 vehicles, what really matters is the collective placement of all of your cars. Also, you're going to be rewarded victory points throughout the game for every lap in which you, not every lap, every turn in which you ended in first place. If one of your cars ended in first place at the end of a sequence of turns, everybody around the table went once, then you get rewarded a victory point. So if you maintain the lead for most of the game, even if you do not win the race, you will be rewarded with a good amount of victory points for doing so. Really cool, really neat. The components are not the greatest, which is typical of GMT, but mechanically speaking, if you like race-themed games, then Thunder Alley is one you absolutely have to consider. My number 101 game, the game that just barely missed it out of my top 100, Thunder Alley. And that's it for today's list, folks. Thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Please make sure to catch us in a few days as I will be sharing the top 100. We'll be going into the main list, and I'll be covering my number 100 to number 91 games of all time. Thank you so much for joining us here. Comment down below. Tell me what you think about this group of games, and I'll catch you guys next time. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.